There is only one real problem in the world, and it doesn't matter whether the desired accomplishment is managing a sports team, building a business, or running an empire. The problem is the same: leadership. Because of the tremendous consequences involved and outcomes that affect the lives of so many, the importance of leadership is immutable through the ages and highly relevant into the future. Welcome to the Leadership Lyceum, a CEO's virtual mentor. Now, here's your host, Tom Lindquist.
You've entered the Leadership Lyceum. We'll bring you direct access to top CEOs and directors of boards in an interview format that provides insight on situational issues that confront CEOs every day. Think of it as a CEO's virtual mentor. We're back for the conclusion of our conversation with Mark Pytosh, CEO of Carl Icahn-controlled CVR Partners in Houston. In part one, we discussed his experience in working for a variety of private equity investors, including Sam Zell and Carl Icahn, and we began to delve into habits he needed to break and a shift in focus he needed to make in becoming CEO. Coming up in the conclusion, we'll continue to explore more specifics on Mark's own development as CEO. Plus, we'll gather Mark's views on the importance for CFOs that aspire to CEO to get coaching, feedback, and support from the current CEO. There's a two-way responsibility there. Stay tuned. Were you looking forward intentionally thinking about CEO someday and getting these experiences, or is it more like you're in the midst of it all and saying, I'm acquiring all these good experiences that probably will create options for me as I get up and onward? What was it?
Yeah, it's funny that you say that because, again, with the benefit of hindsight, I would say that I was trying to piece together all these different experiences so that I could be a CEO. It's only been in recent years where I even thought about that. I've always worked for owners. I always had either a private equity firm or, in the case of Covanta, the chairman was Sam Zell, and,
right.
and there were a couple other large owners, and they effectively were the owners of the company. And then when I came to CVR, it's controlled by Carl Icahn, the owner of the business. I like the decisive nature of what their expectations are. You need to make some decisions, and you need right or wrong, and you need to keep moving. But in recent years, as I had more experience in different companies, I really began to formulate my own views about how a company should be run. Some things I agreed with the CEOs that I worked with, some things I did not agree with. You get to a point in your career where you either decide, I want to be the person making the decision, or I accept the role that I have, which is CFO is a great role, but you're not the ultimate decision maker. The CEO makes the final decision, and I just got to the point where I wanted to make the final decision, and so that's really what drove me these last few years, where I decided, this has been a great set of experiences, but I really would like to be in a position to make the decision. And it took a long time before I even thought that I had the judgment to make those decisions.
As you talk about it, Mark, with working for owners, I think it's an interesting concept because I can imagine that with a Sam Zell, with a Carl Icahn, it's almost crystallizing the shareholder group that you're serving. How has that shaped your leadership?
It teaches you that you need to really think through whatever challenges you have and develop your position and be prepared to defend it. And it's not to say that doesn't occur at a board. There are plenty of strong board members that push hard.
Sure.
But I think in the context of that, where it's the owner's money, because effectively you're playing with their money and you're making decisions that impact their investment. It tends to almost personalize it a little bit more than someone who's a professional director, because effectively if you make a good decision, you make money for the owner. If you make a bad decision, you lose money for the owner. And that group shares one very common approach, which is they have a scorecard, and it's investment gain or investment loss. There's really, yes, they try to understand the strategy, the business, the company, but at the end of the day, they have that scorecard. What I've learned is to sort of have to be at the top of your game all the time, because you get a lot more intense focus if you have an owner. I've just grown accustomed to being scrutinized intensely. You grow accustomed to what that's like.
Let's take a short break and we'll be right back with Mark Pytosh, CEO of CVR Partners. We talked earlier on about criteria, attributes that you'd look for, or maybe a board would look for or be biased against. If you were advising a board on developing the CFO over maybe a 3-year period to a viable successor, what types of things would you advise them on in terms of experiences?
Well, I think that what I've seen being the CFO of 3 companies and working with different CEOs and different boards, the board typically will see a CFO in a very narrow context.
Meaning, when you say that, from a stereotypical fashion, or just the interaction that they see will be?
As a practical matter, by definition, the CEO sets the board's agenda. The CEO is the conduit from the board to the management team. And in the context of a lot of the interaction, whether the CFO has a broad portfolio of responsibilities or a broader portfolio, usually the CFO is talking about the results or about the if it's an acquisition or the budget or the quarterly results. The CFO is really talking about a pretty narrow topic. Sometimes it's not clear to the board what contribution in a broader context the CFO would make in the company. When you go to the board meeting, the CEO is the person who communicates most of what's going on. Some CEOs will give both the CFO or other senior executives more airtime with the board, but some won't. And in those cases, they don't really know what the CFO does for the company. Therefore, they wouldn't know whether that person was a viable candidate or not. And I think, quite frankly, in some companies, the CFO's not ever going to be a viable candidate and, quite frankly, may not want to be. Where a CFO has a skill set, it, one, needs to be identified, and two, a CFO with a good skill set should be given other responsibilities to test, because something can always happen to the CEO. The CEO could leave, the CEO could get sick, the board gets frustrated with the CEO, whatever. And if you don't develop people behind the CEO, by definition, you're going to have to go outside. Good CFOs who know the business, they know how the company makes money. There are some CFOs that either maybe even have the portfolio, they could do it, the board may or may not know that, or that the person should be tested in areas that are outside their comfort zone to see whether they could migrate into that role. Having some more role in operations or in some of the softer areas, like in HR or government relations or in business development, but in areas that are a little further afield, to test what range of skills does that CFO have. If you have a very controlling CEO, very difficult to get airtime and visibility. You're probably going to be low visibility.
Right.
And it could be that you're very talented and capable, and most of the time those CFOs end up, someone who's really talented and capable ends up leaving. But I think that I think CFOs, it's such a demanding job. It's a very demanding job. There's so, especially in a public company with the control requirements and governance, it is a very, that part I do not miss of having to be the centerpiece of that in the company, because it's very demanding. That also limits how much time, even if you're interested, how much time you can spend in other areas. It's a very demanding job. And what you have to go through to satisfy the audit committee and SOX compliance, that is a very time-consuming, demanding process. How many hours in a day can you commit to doing something else? And the other thing is, a lot of times it depends on if the CEO has confidence in you and the CEO wants to mentor you and bring you along. And you do see those cases where leaders emerge behind a CEO because that CEO had confidence in the CFO and mentored them and brought them into the ring, right, inside their thought process, and mentored them along the way. So you do see CFOs emerge. That's internally, that's where usually it's because that relationship is good, the respect is there, and the CEO brings the CFO along. But I think that's not normal.
We'll be right back with Mark Pytosh, CEO of CVR Partners. It's interesting because it seems like there's a number of conditions that have to be just right for the CFO to succeed. What you're saying is the exposure that's a prerequisite for the board to consider them, and maybe the experience that CFO would be given to develop more broadly than a CFO, and the mentorship that you described. Everything comes through the conduit of the CEO and the CEO's willingness to spend that time and dedicate that effort. It all centers on the CEO in terms of doing that.
It does. Now, the other side of that is a lot of CFOs either don't want to or don't have the right personality to be a CEO. Not everything you do is a calculator and a pencil. You put some of that aside because you've got to allocate time to a lot of other different issues that aren't purely analytical. And some folks can't get there. Actually, a lot can't get there because it's that they just don't take the other side seriously. It's not, the people issues are like, come on.
Right. It's not authentic to them.
Not important enough.
Right.
And, they don't think about their body language and their leadership and how important that is.
Mm-hmm.
And that point, and again, that's a transitional issue for a CFO, which is it's not a calculator every day.
Do you think you can go out and be coached on your deportment, your communication style, your body language?
I think you can be mentored that way too.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's not any different than, say, a chief operating officer. Some folks from that branch can't ever make it to the CEO because they can't deal with a lot of other issues because they're just not wired that way. They don't think that that's important. For some people, they just don't have the exposure or experiences, but some people just aren't going to ever get there. I think it's human nature, and I think that, and again, I think that's the CEO's job. What you do as a CEO, the first things you start doing is you look around and you say, who else could be the CEO here?
Mm-hmm.
You have to keep an open mind that it could come from somewhere in your senior executive ranks, and you have to judge about what their skills are, but what areas do they really need development? What could they do to do, and could they do it? Because some people are great in their position, but they're never going to rise above that position, and that's okay because the company needs a lot of critical people in positions, and you just have to find those people that are open-minded or have the personality that they say, I'm willing to learn or do things differently than I do today, because that's what's important to be effective.
We'll be right back with Mark Pytosh. So now you're in the seat, and if we do agree that the next people coming up and the potential successors for you, they really need your support and you developing them to do that. What are you looking for in that group? What stands out to you when you say, I think this person could be a viable successor? What are some of the attributes you're looking for there?
I'm always looking for people that are strong fundamentally, whatever area that they're in operations or finance or commercial sides of the business. But, the intellectual curiosity to reach into other areas, even if they don't know but they're interested and they want to know. Because that curiosity is a critical part of expanding your portfolio. So if you went to someone and said, hey, I'd like you to take on this project or this role because it'll go beyond your focus area, your skills, how do they respond to that? Are they really interested? Are they intellectually interested? Do they want to do that? Or do they just want to stay in the area that they're in? Or when they get over there, they just want to bring their approach into that area, even if that's not working. And that's how you test people to see, okay, if I put you outside your comfort zone, how would you do there? And I think if you want to bring people along, you test them outside their comfort zone and you talk to them. Part of it is talking about the comfort zone. And, to help somebody, truly help someone, you really need to talk to them about things that they need to work on or where it's not their strength. Telling somebody how good they are in the area they're good in is not helpful. And in my whole career, I've never found it useful, to spend lots and lots of time discussing someone in their, how they're performing in the areas where they're absolutely strong. You have to recognize that, but the time should be spent on these are the things. If you want to keep, move to the next level, you have to work on these areas. And what is it going to take to overcome, or what do you need to do to get better in those areas? I've always focused on that with the people that work for me, which is these are some things that you should think about. Work on this. You're going to get better. You're going to be more effective. If you work on these three things, you'd be a much stronger manager, or you could be you could move to the next level. Those people always help me the most. That's what a good mentor does for you. They tell you they're honest with you. They tell you the things that you need to work on. Some companies do that well, and some companies don't.
We're at the end. There may be some things on your mind that you wanted to mention in the CEO from CFO context that we didn't cover. We've had a wide-ranging discussion here, but there may be something on your mind that...
Well, I think that in talking to CFOs, and I think the statistic is something less than 10% of, maybe 5% of CFOs ever become a CEO. Maybe it's 1 in 20. The one piece of advice that I would give to CFOs, and I understand how demanding the job is. It's very demanding, but especially in the context of public company CFO. The one piece of advice that I would give to any CFO is to always be looking for ways to expand into areas outside of finance. Whatever the possibilities in a company, either on a project basis or to take on some additional responsibility. Not that they need to put more on their schedule, but if you ever wanted to keep your optionality open to do something else or to move up, I think that you have to demonstrate that outside of your core area, you can be effective in some other capacity. If you can prove to the world, to the CEO and the board and everyone else that you are competent somewhere else, you have to demonstrate that you have a competency that's outside of finance. Look, you can have a great finance career, but in case you decide and you change your mind down the road, if you've demonstrated that competency, you're going to open some doors that you don't have. Give yourself the option that you've demonstrated that you have skills that are outside of finance. And again, it's not for everybody, but I think that's, and I did that, not because I knew that. I'm saying with the benefit of hindsight, you show that you have some other skill other than just finance.
Thank you, Mark, and thanks for inspiring this whole dialogue.
That was fun.
And thanks for hosting me and for being part of it. I'm looking forward to featuring it.
Okay, thanks, Tom.
That completes our last installment of the interview with Mark Pytosh from CVR Partners. Keep your phones out and look for new content next weekend. We'll be back the 18th, 19th of June with a new episode. Here's a little preview of what's to come. Moving to CEO from CFO is a major step. Taking the step while making a move into a new organization adds yet another degree of difficulty. But add financial distress, bankruptcy, and expectations toward growth and value creation upon the emergence, it's a tall order for any new CEO, or for any CEO for that matter. We'll be waiting on you next week. the 18th and 19th of June, with your next virtual mentor, Bob Flexon, CEO of Dynegy in Houston. We'll see you then. The Leadership Lyceum, a CEO's virtual mentor, has been a production of Dinosaur Productions, LLC, copyright 2016, all rights reserved. Come back and listen. It's lonely at the top.